As we do step into our teaching time, we say this every week, or at least we try to. I want to say this right off the bat. If you don't have a Bible, we are very purposeful about opening this together. We want everybody who calls Colonial Church their church home to have a Bible. Specifically, we have a pile back here in the back that we're constantly replenishing. Part of our giving, with all the different ways our money's going to meet the needs in Nairobi, Kenya, with the Jacaranda trip, as well as a lot of other things, but part of that money is going to replenish this pile of Bibles. If you don't have one, you get one now, you get one after the service. We believe this book is really important for our journey, not just in our teaching time as we gather each weekend, but on our own. As Kelly was saying, in the midst of stress, in the midst of the day-to-day stuff that each of us does, if we're not worshiping, if we're not in prayer with the Father, if we're not opening up this book and asking Him to teach us some things, if we're not leaning into it together, then we're really falling short of, I think, what God offers to us, invites us into. One of the challenges with understanding this book, to state one of the obvious truths, is this was written in Hebrew and Greek. And unless you're different than me, you don't speak Hebrew or Greek. And so we are relying on some brilliant scholars. This particular version of Scripture, this interpretation of Scripture, is the New Living Translation. It's the one we most often read from together. These are guys and women who actually know the Greek, know the Hebrew, and can translate for us. But that is a challenge for us, isn't it, to take this book that's in so many ways is Greek to us and make it applicable to our lives. There's a Greek word from the Bible that has become very meaningful to me for different reasons, and it's so meaningful to me, I had it put on my arm. So I have a tattoo here of a Greek word. One of the reasons this is meaningful to me, first of all, is because this is my dad's handwriting. And I remember years ago when I decided to put this on my arm, quick note, my dad is not excited at all about tattoos. He's not a fan. And I knew this, but I was an adult at this time, and I decided I was going to do it anyway. And so I tricked my dad. I got him to write out this Greek word. I even lied to him about why it was, and then I got it rescaled, and I had an artist put it on my arm. And I remember it was a couple months later before I finally saw him, and I showed up, and he sees this on my arm. And I don't know if he was more shocked that I had a tattoo or that his handwriting was on my arm. But nonetheless, that was a really fun moment for me. It's very meaningful to me because my dad is important to me and his influence on my life. But also the word itself is even bigger. The word is eletheroson. That's the Greek word, eletheroson. And I don't speak Greek. I'm probably pronouncing that kind of wrong. But this word is especially meaningful. It's a Greek word from the Scripture. Paul uses it one particular time in Galatians chapter 5. In one of his letters to Christians in Galatians 5, he says, this is what Jesus has done for you and for me. Because the translation of this one word is, He has set free. He has set free. Jesus has set me free. He has set me free from the long-term consequences of my choices. Jesus has set me free from my own sin. Jesus has set me free from judgment, from condemnation. And not just set me free from some things, He has set me free for some things. He set me free to some things. He set me free to enjoy this life to the full, like He created me to. He set me free to love people like He loves people. Freedom, He has set me free, is just it's a central truth to me of the good news of Jesus. So I put it on my arm. I've been thinking about that, especially this week, because Jordan, one of our other pastors, started our teaching series last week sharing he doesn't have a tattoo. He doesn't know if he's ever going to get a tattoo. But if he was going to get a tattoo, he'd put a Greek word on his arm from the Scripture, and that word is tupos. Tupos. And Jordan told us that it basically means two different things: the impact made or the example followed. The impact made, the influence, the difference made, or the example followed. It really got me thinking this past week, especially as I sat down a couple of times with my journal and thought back to the people who had that tupos, that impact on my life, people whose examples I had chosen to follow in my life. These words from the book of Hebrews actually came to mind. I wrote this in my journal too. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 7. Page 974, if you've got one of our free Bibles. Hebrews 13:7. The author says, Remember your leaders who taught you the Word of God. Think of all the good that has come from their lives and follow the example of their faith. Look back, remember these folks who had this tupos, this influence on your life. They taught you the Word of God, and follow their example. I want to ask you a few questions today, a few who questions today. So if you're writing notes on the back of the handout with a pen or a pencil, or if you want to go on the app, go down to the dock, click on weekends and notes. You can use your thumbs and you can write some notes there. But if you're writing notes, I have a few who questions I want to ask you today, and I want to encourage you, I want to invite you to participate. Don't just blow this off. Don't just think of a name, you'll forget it later. Write it down, put it in your notes in the app, put it in your notes on the handout. First question, who specifically has shaped your spiritual journey? Looking back, all of us have different figures, influences in our life. Who were the leaders who taught you the Word of God, as the book of Hebrews tells us? Jordan shared last weekend about his grandmother, his Mimi, who in so many ways made a significant difference in his life. For me, I think back, I definitely think of my mom and my dad. I was very blessed. Both my parents, from earliest memories on my end, they loved Jesus. He was real to them. They had an interactive relationship with God. We talked to him as a family. We prayed together a lot in our home. And I would say, most importantly, as I stepped into my adolescence and my growing doubts and my bigger questions and my own wrestlings about what I believed, what I could not get away from is that my parents really believed this stuff, that he was real to them. I could not get away from that. I saw it every day. I saw it 7 days a week. I also think of my youth pastor, Scott. I've told a few Scott stories even in my first few months here at Colonial. Scott was one of those rare adults in my life who saw me for who I was. I think most of the adults in my life I put a really good mask on, but Scott knew me for the rebellious, secretive, skeptical, unsure teenager that I was. And he loved me right where I was. He didn't try to change me. He definitely didn't judge me. And he became a friend. He became a rare adult influence in my life in that season. I was also continuing to journal, and I thought about Al McFarland. Al, he let us call him Al. Al was a master sergeant in the U.S. Army. He was my Sunday school teacher. So we would come to our church growing up on Sunday mornings, and all the kids my age would go to this class. And Al was our teacher. I thought he was bigger than the Hulk. He was this intimidating man. He was gruff, but he also was very tender, and he cared about me and the other boys in our class. And it didn't matter how tired I was on a Sunday morning, I could not help but learning something from Al. I definitely look back at my upbringing, my spiritual upbringing as a kid, and I can't help but be grateful. I don't know your stories. All of us have different journeys. I don't know what your family was like. I don't know what, if any, your church upbringing was like. For me, I cannot help but be grateful for multiple adults who taught me about God, who modeled faith in Jesus for me. But you know what else I realized looking back on those influences, looking back at those who made a difference in my life as a child and now as an adolescent? They were all older than me. All of them. They were all older than me. Growing up, I didn't have a single friend who was my age who loved Jesus. At least no one that I was close to, no one that I knew, which was especially difficult as a teenager. It meant that this idea of belief in God, this connection with him, this ongoing relationship with him, this trust in Jesus, that was for old people. That was for people like in their 30s and 40s, right? Or 70s or 80s. That was for old people. It wasn't for me. My peers wanted to play hard, enjoy life, feel good, and stay out of trouble with the old people. And so that's what I did. I played hard, and I enjoyed life, and I searched for all the different ways I could feel good, and I got really good at staying out of trouble with the old people. I got good at telling my parents and the other older influences in my life, teachers and coaches and people at church, exactly what they wanted to hear, or at least what I thought they wanted to hear. And I'd take the mask off with my friends, or I'd put a different mask on in different settings. Now, don't get me wrong, the influence of these, quote, old people was still significant in my life, because there was a very real internal dialogue going on in my heart and mind. I was constantly asking, what do I believe? Is God real? Why do bad things happen to good people? Where is God when that happens? What does God want for my future? I was asking all these questions, but I had nobody my age to share it with. I had no one my age to have that conversation with. And then at the age of 18, I left my family in Germany, and I moved back to Texas, specifically to Waco, Texas, to attend Baylor University. And I made friends right away, like we all do, with people just like ourselves. I made friends with people like me who wanted to play hard, enjoy life, feel good, and stay out of trouble as much as possible. And for the first time ever, I made a few friends with people my age, 18, 19, who loved Jesus. Blew my mind. It was a whole new experience. There was a guy named Chu, C-H-U. He lived in the dorm room next to me, and Chu was a second-generation South Korean immigrant. He was probably the nicest guy on campus. I think there's about 14,000 students at Baylor at the time. I'm convinced he was the nicest guy on campus. Chu would ask me to go to church with him over and over again. I think it took at least a dozen times before I finally said yes. Chu always had an alternative idea, a different plan when all these other guys on my dorm hallway were talking about going to get hammered or going to get in trouble somewhere. Chu became a very good friend to me. Spoiler alert, Chu actually became a college roommate of mine all the way through Baylor. I was in his wedding. He was in my wedding. We've kind of lost touch over the years, but I'm excited because my wife and I have plans next fall to go down to Baylor for homecoming weekend. We're going to see Chu and his wife, Gina. It's going to be a fun time to catch up. I point to Chu. I point specifically to the end of my sophomore year at Baylor, and I've said this before here. That's the moment, that's the season that I said, I'm in. I'm in, God. I'm tired of trying to do this on my own. It's not my parents' faith anymore. This is my faith. You are real to me. I want to trust you with my life. I want to follow you. And people like Chu had everything to do with that journey of mine. Probably the biggest influence on me then as a young Christian was a guy named Carson. Carson was another Baylor student. He was originally from Chicago, so I thought he talked really funny. But even though Carson was only 1 year older than me, and Carson was actually about a half foot shorter than me, I looked up to Carson. I looked up to Carson a lot. I wanted to be like Carson. I wanted what he had. He talked about Jesus with this sense of wonder and affection that was very, very real to me. And Carson wanted to play hard and enjoy life and feel good and stay out of trouble. And I did not know that you could do both. I did not know that those things went hand in hand with a life grounded in Jesus. I remember Carson, early in our friendship, made me get in a minivan with 6 other Baylor students and himself, and we road tripped up to Boulder, Colorado for a long weekend. We went to the Baylor CU football game. And I remember multiple times on this trip, I vividly remember to this day thinking, I did not know I could have this much fun with Christians. I had no idea. We got back, Carson pretty quickly asked me to get into a Bible study, a small group with him and this guy named Doug Butler and this guy named Dave Shinman. They were also in my wedding down the road. And Carson just took all 3 of us under his wing. And he said, let's do this thing. I want to help you grow in your faith. I want to help you understand what it means to know Jesus. We went through a particular Bible study together. I could not get enough. I'd grown up going to church. I'd grown up knowing stuff from the Bible. I'd grown up with Al McFarland and Scott and others, but there was something new, something different happening with my peers. To this day, when I read one of my favorite scriptures that Paul writes to the Christians in the ancient city of Thessalonica, I think of Carson when I read these words. 1 Thessalonians 2:8. Paul wrote, "We loved you so much that we shared with you not only God's good news, but our own lives too. Oh my goodness, that's Carson in my life. He didn't just love me enough to give me some information, to teach me something. He gave me his life. He invited me into the daily rhythms of life. He would show up at my apartment. Hey, what are you doing? We would go to the grocery store. We would go to the movies. We would stay up way too late. We'd play ball. We would study a little bit we would study. We would do all kinds of things together, and he invited me in to his life. And the way that God used that young man in my life, that peer, as opposed to the many older folks that he'd already used to that point, that was significant. Carson made a real difference in my life, real Tupos. One particular light bulb that came on for me in my college years, this was significant. This stands out to me. I remember us asking the questions together, what about all the things that the Bible does not address? What about smoking pot? What about speeding? What about how far is too far with a girl? Like, we just couldn't find that anywhere in the scriptures. And by the way, it's not in there. We couldn't figure it out. These are important questions to a young man, right? Couldn't figure this out. So we started asking these questions together. And I remember Carson was so good at taking us back to a couple places in scripture. He found some words of Paul that really resonated with me. And before I share them with you, Paul in this passage, he grabs a hold of some words that everybody knew. You know how there's some words, there's some jingles, there's some advertising slogans, there's some phrases that just stick in our brains. I know we're all the same. Like if I say it's finger licking good, you think KFC, right? I mean, right away. If I say just do it, you can see the swoosh in your mind. It's just Nike, right? If I sing the jingle, we are farmers. Yeah. See, it's just, there's stuff in our brain that we don't even realize is there. Paul does that. Paul quotes an oft-used phrase of his time in his culture in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 23. Paul says, you say, quote, I am allowed to do anything. That was a mantra. That was a quote of the day. You can hear the free spirit behind it, right? I'm allowed to do anything. You say I am allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you. You say, I am allowed to do anything, but not everything is beneficial. Carson took us to that passage. We started wrestling with this idea of drinking. It started, I remember, when Carson was at a restaurant with me in Waco, Texas, and he ordered a beer. And I remember in that moment being very confused, because I had grown up where drinking was something that I did underage, I did lying to my parents, I did to excess. It was all associated with rebellion and negative. And here I am, here's my new hero, the guy I want to be like, the guy who loves Jesus, and he's a Baylor student with me, and he's ordering a beer in Waco, Texas, here in the Bible Belt, and everybody's looking at us. And I remember looking at Tom and looking around. I think I literally looked around and went, Tom, what are you doing? And I'll never forget the look in his eyes when he looked at me and said, you Texas Christians are so weird. This is my Chicago brother in Christ. And we got to talking about it, and we got to talking about it with Doug and Dave, and we started wrestling with, okay, what does the Bible say about drinking? And we looked at a few different passages. Psalm 104 says, God made wine to gladden the heart of man. And then Ephesians 5, very clearly, don't get drunk. Very helpful to me at 21. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, 2 Peter 2, both Paul and Peter say, don't let anything master you. Don't be addicted to anything. Don't be dependent on anything. Not just alcohol, anything. We took all that together. We looked at Romans chapter 13, where clearly Paul says we have to obey the laws of the land. As Christians, part of the way we honor God is we obey the laws of government. And we're putting all this together, and ultimately he brought us back to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, where Paul says, well, you say, I'm allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you. You say, I'm allowed to do anything, but not everything is beneficial. So I remember us talking about it. 2 of us were 21, 2 of us were 22. We're not getting drunk, but we are living in this culture, in this season of life in Waco, Texas, in the Bible Belt, at a Baptist college, where people around us, most of our peers, our college-age peers, associate drinking not with moderation and maturity, but with excess and partying. And we kind of came to this conclusion together. Okay, maybe it's not beneficial. Maybe it's not best. Maybe it's not God-honoring for us to live like this. Let's live like this. Let's not choose to drink in public. Let's not choose to make this a stumbling block for people. Let's understand that not everything is beneficial. Not everything is good for us. This was so big a deal for me. Maybe for some of you, that's a random side note. Maybe for some of you, you're wondering why we're talking about that. This was huge for me. I'm 21 years old. I am a new, eager to grow Christian. And I am with my peers, not an older, wiser mentor, but with my peers, and we're studying the scripture, and we're digging deep. What does it mean to follow Jesus faithfully? It was really, really big for me. When I think about Carson and the difference he made in my life in that season, 21, 22 years old, I don't think I can articulate it strong enough. I saw him a couple years ago at a Baylor football game, another one of our things we had in common, a love for sports. And I tried to tell him thank you, and I could just tell, I don't think he really got how big an impact he made on my life. Carson makes me think of some of the words that Jordan quoted from Paul last weekend. 1 Corinthians 11, chapter 1, same page as that previous passage we read. Paul said these bold words, "You should imitate me just as I imitate Christ." I'm chasing after Jesus. You chase after him right behind me. You chase after me. Here's what I want to lay out for us today. Yes, we need older, wiser mentors in our life. We need people who are way ahead in the race that we can see in the distance going, I want to be like him. I want to be like her. And we're chasing after them. We need older, wiser people who have a perspective that we lack, that have wisdom, have life experience. We need this. And we need people who are on our left and our right in the race, who are in our same season of life, who are in our same age bracket, so to speak, that we can chase after Jesus together. We need both. I'm convinced of this. Who is that person in your life right now, this second category? Here's another who question for you. If you're taking notes, if you're going to write down in the app, who is making a difference in your spiritual journey? Maybe even without realizing it. Maybe they're on your left, they're on your right, they're in that same season of life, and they're not even comprehending that they are leading you, but you know that they are. I want to give you a second. Come up with a name. Have you thanked them? Have you been intentional and said, you don't even realize you are spurring me on in my faith. You make me want to be more like Jesus. Have you told them that? Have you encouraged them with that? In fact, let me flip it. Who are you leading? Here's that third who question in your notes. Who is someone you can run alongside? Someone close to your age or in the same season of life that you can love and lead? And I know I lost some of you when I asked that question, because it's easier for us to say, well, who's made a difference in my life? Who are the people, the older, wiser people in my past that have made a difference? Who are somebody in my life now that I look up to, even though they're on my left or my right? It's a little easier when we turn it around and say, who are you leading? Who are you influencing that's on your left and your right? I think a lot of us go, I don't have anything to offer, not to my peers. And I want to make this very clear. This truth, this question is for every single one of us right now. It applies to all of us. Whether you're 13 or you're 83. Whether you've known Jesus for a long, long time or you are barely scratching the surface of what it means to know God. Every single one of us has something to offer. If you're one step ahead of another, you have something to offer. That is truth. If you're one step ahead of another, you have something to offer. I mean, we get this logically, right? If any area of life, if you can barely swim, you can help a non-swimmer learn the basics of dog paddling, right? If you played Little League baseball back in the day, You can actually take some kids who are terrible at baseball and help them, coach them into the basics of baseball. If you're conversational at best in a foreign language, you can help someone understand the basics of language. If you're a parent, I don't even mean you're a great parent. I don't even mean you feel like you know what you're doing kind of parent. You're just a parent. Guess what? There are people that are just now stepping into parenting or thinking about stepping into parenting who have wide-eyed, crazy thoughts and fears of, I don't know what that means. You have something to offer. If you're one step ahead of someone, you have something to offer. If you know and you love Jesus, regardless of how much or how little of this book you know, you have something to offer to a curious, searching person. You can help them discover and trust Jesus. You have something to offer. What would happen if all of us decided to push aside our fears and our insecurities and take on one of our peers and pour part of our life into them? If all of us did that, oh my goodness, the growth that we would see in the people around us, we would see it, we would feel it, it would be overwhelming. And the growth in us as we step faithfully into that would be something we would see and we feel. It would make such a profound difference. So I want to ask you this today. Who is one person in your life, one person your age or in the same season of life you're in, that comes to mind? Not someone you're necessarily light years ahead of, but someone you're just a step ahead. You're just a half step ahead of them in some area of life that you could lead, that you could love. Now, with that name in mind, how do you make that happen? You could walk up to them this afternoon, you could give them a call, and you could say, hey, I've prayed about it, I've thought about it, I would like to be your mentor. I don't advise that approach. It's not always received really well. I think there is a time and a place for that boldness, that clarity, but for most of us, I think we can take more of an informal, natural approach. I want to give you a few quick thoughts on how do we lead a peer. I think it's a little easier. How do we lead someone we have rank over? How do we lead someone when we're their boss? How do we lead someone that we're older and wiser? They're a generation or two or three underneath us. It's a little more obvious how do we lead in that regard. But how do we lead a peer? Here's 3 quick thoughts. Number 1, be a friend. A lot of you just went, oh, okay, I can do that. Because we all can be a friend. We know what that means. Here's the truth. There are people in my life who have had influence over me, who've had that tupos, that difference they've made in my life, that have had positional authority. Okay? Someone who had position over me, a boss, a supervisor, someone who's older and wiser, that clearly I was supposed to respect, they were supposed to teach me. That is no small thing. That's influence. You know what's even greater influence than that? Friendship, relationship. The people who know me, who I trust, who care about me, who have proven it over time, the influence they have in my life is even greater. So the number one way we can very clearly lead our peers, that person who comes to mind, without ever saying, I'm going to mentor you now, is to be a friend. To be a friend. And I don't have to tell you how to do that. You could take that name, you could have a blank piece of paper, say, I'm going to list 20 ways I can be a friend to this person. I'm going to list 20 ways I can be a better friend to this person. Be a friend. Number 2, be real. How do we lead a peer, someone on our left or right? We be real. Because humility is winsome, isn't it? I think that's one trait that's in common of anybody who's had significant influence in my life. Whether it's positional authority, whether it's an older, wiser person, or it's one of my peers, all of these folks have had great humility. Because, ultimately, we just don't like being around. We certainly don't like learning from arrogant people, right? If someone really thinks they have a lot to offer to me, I am prone, call it a character flaw, I don't know what it is, but I just give them the stiff arm and I just blow off everything they say, even if what they're saying is really good stuff. There's something about humility that's incredibly winsome. I think one of the ways we can lead people to our left and our right is we're vulnerable. We take risks at sharing about our own failures, about our own doubts. to raise questions we don't even have the answers to. That's leadership. That's sharing the journey with the people to our left and our right. Be a friend, be real, and finally be intentional. I think this is a big deal, especially in our culture, because we don't just drift into these mentoring relationships. We don't just back into influencing the people around us. There's a little bit of osmosis that happens just being around each other, but the really powerful influences are intentional. Tom showed up at my apartment. I know he did this on purpose. He wasn't just swinging by. He asked me to go to Colorado with him on a trip. He asked me to be in a Bible study. He asked me to hang out. He called me, said, let's go play ball. There's something about being intentional that leads to influence that matters. I want to say this too, as a pastor here at Colonial. My hope, I want to paint this picture partly for accountability for me, partly because I want to dream together. I've talked to Jordan, our new spiritual formation pastor, quite a bit about this the last few weeks since he arrived. I want us to be a church that's all about pouring into each other. I don't want this to be a church that's just 3 services on the weekend, over 2 days. People don't know each other. You come, you sit in these fixed chairs, you face this way, and you leave. That's not what I want for you. That's not what I want for me. It's not what I want for my family. I want us to be in community together. I want us to be in groups, in teams where we really know each other's names. We care about each other. We're taking risks with each other, and we're chasing after Jesus together. And I want us to have a culture that's just fostered more and more over time where we are mentoring people, where every person who calls Colonial Church home has one or more persons that you're pouring into and one or more persons who's pouring into you. That's my hope. That's my dream. I think that's faithful following Jesus together. What does it look like for you to be intentional with that person that comes to mind? To be a friend, to be real, and to be intentional. This life that God has for each of us, it's meant to be experienced together. I feel convicted to say this often. For those of you who think religion, who think Christianity is about you and God, it's about you and Jesus. Well, first of all, most of those folks aren't here now because they don't want to be here. They think it's about just them and God, them and Jesus. If that's you, you haven't read this book. This book is clear in that regard. It is meant for us to do together. We are meant to have this experience, this understanding of Him, this connection with Him in the context of community. And it's meant to be passed on. It's not just for me. It's not just for you. It's like God's handed us this big baton. This is life in Jesus. This is all the goodness of God. This is the fruit of the Spirit that's laid out in the Scriptures. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control, all this stuff that starts to bubble out of us as God transforms us. It's meant to be passed on to somebody else. It's meant to be done together and passed on. Who are you going to be intentional about doing that with? You and I have an opportunity, a privilege, a gift of making a difference, Tupos, in the lives of the people around us. Not just our own kids, not just those natural things that come along, but with great intentionality together. May we be ever so diligent. May we be faithful. May we get after it. May we experience this together. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the times you give us just to choose to remember. Thank you for the names that flood my brain. I trust the same for our whole church. I trust that we can think of the folks that you have used to speak a word of truth, to model your character, different seasons of life that you've used different people. Thank you for them. I pray that you would help each of us, myself included, to be intentional about thanking them. Lord, if they're no longer with us, I pray that we thank you for them. We tell stories to each other like Jordan did last weekend about his Mimi, and we celebrate those folks. For folks that are still around, would you help us? Would you motivate us to reach out and thank them and encourage them? Father, I also ask that you would bring to mind, if you haven't already, for each of us, someone that you want for us to be very intentional with, to love and to lead, to befriend, to sacrifice for, to be real with. Would you make us more and more a people? Your church here, Colonial, your city here in Wichita Falls, would you make us more a people, a movement of your people that's really loving each other well? Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.